Good afternoon, everybody. Again, this is Matt Kofelt. I am Program Manager here at Rock Island District, and I guess Program Manager for what we're calling the Illinois Waterway Consolidated Closures. Majority of this will be specific to what we're planning for 2020, although I will also touch on some other years that are affected by some of our recent planning efforts. So to just give a little bit of background on the consolidated closures, the main point is to upgrade and improve some of the infrastructure on the Illinois Waterway. There are 8 lock and dams that are on the Illinois Waterway that we manage here in the Rock Island District. All of these locks are approaching 80 to 90 years old, so there's a lot of maintenance that needs to be done. And unlike, for those of you that are familiar with the upper Mississippi River, which we have the luxury of some of those locks shutting down in the winter due to weather conditions, and during that time, that's when we're able to perform a lot of our maintenance, dewatering the lock chambers and those types of things to get some of that done. Historically, the Illinois Waterway has not done that, so it's open year-round unless there's some other unique circumstance such as flooding or other item that's impacting the waterway. So because of that, we had to come up with a way to dewater some of these sites and try to minimize the impact to not only the navigation industry, but to all of the stakeholders that utilize the Illinois Waterway. So this originally started with a few projects that were upcoming, one of them being the LaGrange Major Rehab, and there are a few other sites that we were doing that we needed to do some major work. So in starting to coordinate those efforts with industry, we quickly realized that the preference would be to try and consolidate as much of that work into 1 year rather than having a lock closed to dewater each, like several years in a row, which is what it would have amounted to. So that's kind of the goal here, is to consolidate these efforts into the same year, and that way freeing up years in between where we don't have any sort of significant planned closures. So specific to the 2020 work, it is work at 6 sites concurrently, and 4 of those locks are requiring dewatering. Majority of the work that's impacting the use of the lock takes place during a summer closure and/or restriction period. Most of those efforts are from the beginning of July through the end of October, and we picked those dates kind of in coordination with industry, but also to avoid historical spring flooding seasons and fall harvest seasons. That's kind of what resulted in this taking place during the summer. So next on the screen here is what we've had out there for a while now with our schedule, trying to show what sites are impacted and for approximately how long. This work starts in the year 2019, so this upcoming summer, where we have some work taking place at Marseilles and Starved Rock, and I'll get into that in a little bit more detail here in a little bit. And then, as you can see, the majority of the work is out in 2020, where we have 6 sites impacted. And then 3 years from then, out in 2023, we are showing just Brandon Road, and Dresden impacted. So that chart, everything in green is intended just to show that it's open navigation, no planned closures. The stuff in yellow is intended to be a partial closure, which is typically where the lock is closed during the day for 8 to 10, sometimes up to 12 hours, and then we are passing traffic at night. And typically with those partial closures, we have something impacting the ability to pass full width navigation. So usually there's a width restriction that goes along with that, and or a restriction in the ability to pull unpowered cuts through the lock. And then the stuff shown in red is a full closure where the lock is closed and we are unable to pass any traffic. So I'll get into what's planned in 2019. This work is at Starved Rock and Marseilles Lock and Dam, and this work is all being done with a contract that we have already awarded. So we have quite a bit of details on this since it is an awarded contract. The work is to install upper bulkhead recesses at both sites. Those sites both currently have what we call emergency miter gates. And historically, those miter gates would be used to dewater the lock chamber, to perform maintenance in the chamber and on the miter gates that are used daily. The emergency miter gates, over the past few years, just based on inspections and other things, those have been deemed unfit for dewatering purposes. So that is what's leading to us needing to install bulkhead recesses on the upper end of some of these lock sites that don't currently have them. So we're able to place bulkheads and dewater the lock chamber in a more safe manner. So at Starved Rock and Marseilles, along with this contract, prior to the navigation restriction period starting, we're expecting to have a few days, potentially 3 or 4, where we will need to have 8 to 10 hour full closures prior to that restriction period. So most likely that's going to be in May sometime. Now when these are determined, we'll be looking at trying to post within 30 days, give an advance notice of when we expect those closures to take place. And that will just be through our typical navigation notices. The navigation restriction period, for this one, it starts on 1 June and goes through the 31 August. So it's 92 days, although there are a few days that I'll get to here where we are not closed. So that's the navigation restriction period, which that restriction period is a partial closure. So we would be passing traffic at night from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. There is a 70-foot width restriction, and we will not have the ability to pull unpowered cuts on the upper end, so we won't be able to pull them upstream. We are going to be in the middle of that restriction period. The lock will be fully opened starting at 5:30 on 3 July, and that will go through to 6 a.m. on 8 July. And primary reason for that is we wanted to have these locks open for the 4th of July holiday. That's a pretty heavy recreational boat traffic time in that area. So in trying to accommodate everything we possibly can with this work, we were able to have that as part of that contract, where we will have the locks open during that time. The full closure that is associated with that contract starts at 1 a.m. On 16 August, and that goes to midnight on 29 August, which is roughly 14 days where we will not be able to pass traffic at all. And the reason for that is, as part of this bulkhead recess installation work, we have to modify the sill that the bulkheads rest on when we install them to dewater the lock, and that goes across the entire width of the lock floor. So we have to do work specific in that area, placing a lot of concrete and other items. So we're unable to continue to pass traffic when that work is taking place. So moving on to the projects that are currently planned to take place in 2020. The primary one being at LaGrange Lock and Dam, which is a major rehab, and also there's major maintenance. This is a contract that we are working through the process of getting to an award. We do expect that to occur, hopefully here in November, but that's a process that we're still working through. And so the information that I have here is what we expect to take place. We will have a little bit more information available if we're able to get to that contract award. That contract has approximately 90-day full closure starting on 1 July, and again, that's in 2020. There will be ongoing work associated with that contract starting in 2019 through 2021, but the majority of the work that impacts navigation is done during that full closure time. So this work does require a full dewatering of the lock chamber, and there is significant repairs associated with this project. That lock has a lot of crumbling concrete and deteriorating steel structures within the lock chamber that need to be repaired or replaced. And we're also looking at replacement of lock machinery. All of that stuff, really no way to do any of that work without completely shutting down the lock and dewatering the lock chamber. The next site is the next one upstream, Peoria Lock and Dam. That one probably has the least amount of work that we are planning during the 2020 closures. That one will be one of our typical dewaterings where we are utilizing in-house crews to perform maintenance and inspection. We expect that one to be approximately 60-day full closure. We don't have the exact start and stop dates, but we expect that to start sometime a little bit after when the LaGrange full closure starts. So looking at mid-July, and then going for approximately 2 months. Now we will be working to firm up the exact dates, so we'll have that stuff planned to have it at least a year prior to the closures taking place. So looking to have that stuff firmed up here by the spring. Moving on to the next two sites, Starved Rock and Marseilles. So this is the work that we will be doing now that the previous year in 2019 we were able to get those bulkhead recesses installed. Now we're able to actually dewater those lock chambers here in 2020, and we would be looking at starting these the same time we would be starting LaGrange. So that would be on 1 July. The most amount of work is at Starved Rock because we are replacing miter gates at both the upper and lower ends. At Marseilles, it is just the upper miter gates. So we are currently going through design of both of these projects. So we're starting to work through all of the details on exactly how long we need the closure to be, exactly all of the work that needs to take place. So right now we're going off of what we expect, and that's at Starved Rock. We expect a 120-day full closure. So that would be from 1 July to 30 October. And then at Marseilles, we would expect that to not have to be quite as long. We are looking at a 90-plus day closure, again, starting at the same time, but hopefully ending about a month earlier. Both of these sites require dewatering of the lock chamber. We are needing to modify the miter gate sills, again, similar to what we had to do for the bulkhead recesses. This is where the miter gates rest, and we are changing the miter gates from they are currently horizontally framed miter gates. We are going to vertically framed miter gates, which allow for us, it's mostly an ease of maintenance and a reliability thing going from horizontally framed to vertically framed. In an emergency situation or other times, we're able to pull vertically framed miter gates out of basically be able to pull those gates in the wet, so we don't have to dewater the lock chamber to perform maintenance on them, where the horizontally framed miter gates require us to dewater the lock chamber. So that's part of the work that we're doing here. That requires us to modify the sills and the anchorages, along with other work that we will be doing, and also with the locks being dewatered, gives us the opportunity to perform additional maintenance and perform inspections. Moving on to the last two sites that are tied to the 2020 plan, and this is essentially doing the same work that we started off doing in 2019 at Starved Rock and Marseilles. We're now doing that at Dresden and Brandon Road, and that's installing the upper bulkhead recesses, again replacing the existing emergency miter gates. So we would expect at both of these sites for these restrictions and closures to be very similar to what I laid out on one of the earlier slides. That was the 2019 plan. We don't have all of the details. Again, these are two sites that we are starting design on, but we do expect those to be very similar in a 90-day restriction period with a 14-day full closure towards the end of that restriction period. Again, as we move forward with design on these, we do expect things to kind of take shape a little bit on what we can communicate and exactly how we expect the durations to be. So we would also be trying to line up this work with the other sites where we would be starting it on 1 July and again going for 90 days from there. This work is similar to Starved Rock and Marseilles, where we're preparing for future work. This is the same thing where we're doing these bulkhead recesses to prepare for potential closures in 2023, where we would be actually going in and replacing the miter gates and doing the associated work. So then, moving forward to the 2023 planned restrictions closures, this is really not as clear as any of the 2020 stuff, just due to how far out it is. There is another effort in the works at Brandon Road that's tied to the Glimmerous study. So there's the potential to match up some of this work that we are doing to replace the miter gates, to also align that with any potential future closures that may need to take place as any approved construction work as part of that study. Don't have a whole lot of information as far as the status on if any of that will take place during 2023, but that's what we're currently planning for right now. And as that process moves along, we'll begin to have a little bit more information. So laying out in that slide, essentially what we know right now. And let's see, yeah, so we go on to the last slide here. We do have information posted on our district website. We do have a navigation section on there and a section that's specific to 2020 closures. So we are trying to post updates and information that we have in that location. And that is an area, probably the best area to get any current updates that we have at this time. Anybody within the government that would like to add anything?
Yeah, this is Tom Heinold. I'm the Chief of Operations for Rock Island District, and I've got the responsibility for the operation and maintenance of the waterway. It's my crews that will be operating the lock. It might be worth mentioning that at Peoria and LaGrange in 2020, during the big closures, those are wicket dams, and there is the possibility, in fact, we hope this happens, of a kind of, I'll call it a Goldilocks situation, where if Mother Nature is providing enough water in the river for a 9-foot channel, we will have the wickets on the bottom of the river, and that will be in an open pass condition. There is some risk associated with that. We don't want to downplay that too much, because there is a possibility that if the river were to drop, we'd have to put the wickets up, and we might pin or trap a tow within the Peoria and LaGrange pools. However, we'll do all we can to accommodate traffic if the weather conditions are appropriate. And I've already fielded a couple of questions, and I'll just anticipate one right now and answer it up front. The dams on the Illinois Waterway will continue to operate as they always have. We will maintain pools so that if there is interpool traffic, recreational, or nav industry, economic, or otherwise, you will be able to transit within the pool. But if you want to get around a dam, a recreational craft will have to portage around a dam, and large towboats, of course, will be pinned within those pools between the dams if the locks are closed. Thanks.
Okay, I am going to open the lines now. If you have any questions that you don't want to ask in person, just feel free to chat them in, and we will answer your question that way as well. So I'm going to unmute everybody.
All participants are now in interactive talk mode.
Say anything, please mute your phone. Do we have any participants who would like to ask questions at this time?
Yeah, that 2019 in Starbuck Marseilles, you say them are both 90-day closures in 2019?
So they are 90-day restriction periods. The slide with that information has a lot of the exact details, and if you didn't have that in front of you, we are going to be posting that, so it will be available available to you. But the specifics are it's a 90-day restriction period from 1 June 2019 to 31 August 2019.
Right.
And that, along with that restriction period, it includes a width restriction, so it's a 70-foot width restriction, and we will not have the ability to pull unpowered cuts on the upper end.
Right,
So
kind of like we did at LaGrange last year or this year?
That's correct. I'm trying to remember when that was, but yeah, correct. We did I think it was last year, we did install bulkhead recesses there, and we had very similar restrictions at that time. The one thing with this is it does include a full closure within that time frame. So the full closure is starting on 16 August 2019, and that goes through 29 August. So for 14 days, there will be a full closure
At both the locks, right?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And then the major stuff is not till 2020, and that starts on July 1?
That is correct.
90 days at LaGrange, 60 days at Peoria?
That is correct. That is currently how we have it planned. Yes.
And Starved Rock will be at 120 days.
Yeah. So that's what we're showing right now. We are currently going through the design of that project, and we are going to try and do everything we can to reduce that number. Although right now, where we're currently at, we are planning for 120 days at Starved Rock. That would be the only site that would be that long. And I'll throw the caveat out there. That is pending, no, I guess, flooding or things beyond our control that we can't foresee at this point in time that may prolong some of these other sites. But we will definitely be doing what we can as we go through the design of Starved Rock to try and reduce that number. But as of right now, based on the work that we have to do, we're looking at 120 days.
Oh, yes, sir. And Marseilles, it'll be anywhere from 90 to 120 also?
That's correct. Although with Marseilles being lesser work than Starved Rock, I think we should be able to reduce that number from 120, but it will be somewhere in between 90 and 120.
Okay. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
We do have a couple questions that came in on chat. One of them, if the wicket dams are down, at what river stage does the work stop at the locks, i.e. high water at Peoria and LaGrange?
That's a good question. I think we could probably sandbag to some extent, depending on where the work is happening, maybe a foot over the guide wall, but as soon as we get over the guide wall, we are going to have to suffer some sort of delay, either for additional work for the contractor to protect his work, or if the water gets deep enough, we may have to reflood the chamber and wait for the water to go back down and then pump it back out and suffer some cleanup time. So we are at significant risk there, but we would have the wicket dam down on the bottom of the river and be an open pass during that entire time that it was flooding. So it would be open to navigation. The risk would be that our contractor, if he has to shut down, if the water is well over the lock wall, that we will suffer a delay and won't be able to reopen again as originally scheduled.
Another question, what circumstances would extend any delay beyond 90 days or 120 days?
Well, I think we just pretty well answered that one. High water is probably our biggest risk as far as scheduled delays go.
And then, with such a huge closure, how do you plan to handle the backlogs of traffic upon each project opening?
Well, just like happened recently on the Mississippi when we reopened after a long closure, the queues will be built and managed by the navigation industry. I'm sure that IRCA will have some say in that, and the Coast Guard port captain in arranging the queues through the locks in the most expeditious manner possible. based on those established queues once we reopen.
And we have one other question on chat. What is the cost of the project through 2020?
Oh.
And then do we have confidence that we will have the funds? And the third part, what type of expected longevity will these repairs provide to the locks?
Oh, great.
Okay, to speak to a little bit of the costs, some of that is still in the planning stages, but I guess specific to 2020, we're looking at the work at the 6 sites. As far as confidence in funding and being able, will we be able to proceed with this work? So LaGrange is a project that we have put out for solicitation, and it is currently going through the source selection process. So that is a contract that we are pretty confident that we will be able to get to an award here in November. So that one I think will be good proceeding with. Peoria is work that we would be doing with internal crews. So worst case on Peoria is if we don't get the funding to do that work, we would just remove that from the plan. At Starved Rock and Marseilles, this is work that we currently have under design, and it is work that we have currently requested the funding for. The same thing goes with Dresden and Brandon Road, the bulkhead recesses. So at all 4 of those sites, we have the designs underway, and we are fully expecting to be awarding contracts for that work by the end of our fiscal year 19, which would be by the end of September in 2019. Now, all 4 of those are currently contingent on us receiving funding in our work plan. However, based off of the planning and the communication that we have done to date through our chain up through MVD and through headquarters of USACE, we are pretty confident that funding will come through, and we will be able to award those contracts. We won't fully know. Timing for that is essentially over the next about a month and a half. We should know by the end of November, early December, on if that funding is coming through for us. Total cost, I don't currently have figures in front of me. And with some of the sensitivities on LaGrange, with that being an unawarded contract, I don't know that I'll be able to state currently on the funding needs right now.
Was there a question?
I have a question about pool stage in Peoria and LaGrange.
Yes, sir.
Barring a flooding event, are you going to try to maintain at the 11 and 12 foot for Peoria?
We have no plans at all to alter from our current regulation plan for Peoria or LaGrange pools. So where they are today is where they will remain through the 2020 and 2023 closures. Yes.
Yeah, well, there was some rumor about down to 6 foot. That's all.
I haven't heard of or pursued anything like a 6 foot drop in any pool. No, not at all.
Yeah, so we're going to get our usual water passing through. All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
We do have another question. Can you clarify the funding contract or the funding/contract difference? So you expect to receive funding this year and award the contract in late 2019.
Yeah. So just to kind of clarify, we are reliant on receiving funds in any given fiscal year for us to move forward with awarding contracts. So right now, all of the work that is taking place in the summer of 2019, so the stuff at Starved Rock and Marseilles that I touched on in one of the first slides, so the work in the summer of 2019, that's an awarded contract. So that has already been funded. It was something that we've proceeded with awarding, so that work will take place. With the work that's in 2020, the only one of those projects that we've actually put out for solicitation with funding to award a contract is LaGrange. So we are working towards awarding a contract on LaGrange. On the rest of the sites, Starved Rock, Marseilles, Dresden, and Brandon Road, in order for us to have a contractor ready to perform the work in the summer of 2020, we would have to be awarding contracts here before the end of our fiscal year 19. So we need to receive the funds in this current fiscal year so we can award a contract by September. That way we have a contractor online that can make preparations to actually do the work in the summer of 2020. And so with these projects, we essentially get funding through two primary streams, and that's through a President's budget, which we've already received for fiscal year 19, and we did not have the funding contained within that to award these contracts. We now are waiting on work plan funds. And so as long as the funding comes through, we will be able to proceed with awarding those contracts. And so just to clarify, our fiscal years, they start on the 1st of October and they run through 30 September. So when I say fiscal year 19 or fiscal year 20, that's the dates that are tied to that. So we just started fiscal year 19, and that will run from the 1st of October 2018 to 30 September 2019. And that is the time frame in which we are looking at awarding the contracts for Brandon, Dresden, Marseilles, and Starved Rock in order to do this work in 2020. Hopefully that answers that question.
Are there any other questions from the field?
Do you foresee these dates changing?
So, not really by much. We started communicating these dates over a year ago. We have maintained. About the only thing we did is we started to shift things out of starting in June, and that was primarily based on the historical flooding patterns. We have a lot. The probability of flooding in June is a lot higher than if we would to push things off and start in July. So some of our very early communication plans started this work in 2020 in June. We've essentially pushed all of that back to start on 1 July. So I do not anticipate the schedule or these dates associated with 2020 changing much at all. They're going to be pretty similar to what we are communicating here today.
Okay, thank you.
The stuff out in 2023, that's a little more uncertain. There's a lot of stuff that has to take place. Again, the whole funding thing. There's some other things that kind of need to line up for all of that to work. So that's a little bit more uncertain. but based on what we're planning now, the dates for 2020 are relatively firm.
That work in 2023 at Brandon Road, that's not including that man-made fish barrier, canal, all that stuff, is it?
It would include any work that is ultimately approved to be done at Brandon Road as part of that study. So any construction work that needs to be done at Brandon Road, we would try to line up the closures together. So we're doing all that work concurrently with this other work. But that is currently a study, and so it does need authorizations and appropriations from Congress before we move forward with any of that work.
Are they still working on trying to get models built for this stuff?
When you say I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Like down here at Erdig, a model for that man-made channel there at Brandon Road. See how it'll get.
We're still looking into that, and again, that would be part of the design phase. And so first we have to complete a chief's report and then get funding to begin design, have a sponsor to also cost share that. So there's several things that need to line up first before we can start that.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Kent Boylan, I hope I said that last name right. Did you have a question? I noticed you had your hand raised.
No, I did not at this time. I'm just listening.
Okay. Any other questions? Without hearing any, we will, in this call, we will be posting the presentation along with the audio of this call on our website as well as our social media, i.e. Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. So be on the look for that. I will try to email all participants who were on the original invite. And so you would get that information as soon as we will post it. So thank you to everybody for your time and participation. And have a good afternoon.